Chrissy and I have decided to kind of do this dialogue and this open call to discuss several topics. So today, I really wanted to discuss with her what foreclosures, pre-foreclosures, auctions, and all that entails, because it's questions that constantly come to me as a property manager and as a broker. So I wanted to be able to go through all the questions that we've had and really understand how it is to invest in pre-foreclosures and whatnot. So to start off with, I'm Tamara Zabak with AIO Realty and Property Management. I'm a property manager and a broker. So we really specialize in helping investors and helping people find the investor within and purchase the right property for them. And Christy?
Thank you. I'm Christy Estevez Puentes. I'm a real estate attorney and title agent in South Florida. I practice mainly residential and commercial real estate transactions, so a lot of closings, and I deal with a lot of investors in all ends of the investment spectrum in all different types of investment transactions. And I've also done my own personal investing, and I really love the nature of that transaction. So that's what we wanted to really highlight today. And everyone can be an investor. Everything is just a matter of getting started. So that's what we kind of wanted to impart, is some tips on how to get started.
Perfect. So I think we should hop right in. When it comes to, I think we should first start with finding the properties, foreclosures, all of that. How do we start? How, as a realtor, as a buyer, as an investor, where do we even begin?
Sure. Well, most investors are looking for a deal. Obviously, you need to have the margins there in order to make it profitable. So one of the main things that they'll be looking for is a distressed property. And what is a distressed property? It can take a few different shapes, but mainly a distressed property is where the owner owes more than the property is worth. So it's underwater. You might hear that term a lot. Also, it could be that the property just needs so much rehab and is so run down, the owner can't take care of it. So it's also distressed.
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes, I feel when we hear distress, people just automatically think that it's a complete rehab. But I think distress is what you're saying. It's a terminology of someone that needs to sell.
Right. I mean, and it can be complete rehab, but it can also be just somebody who's in a situation that they really feel like they can't get out of. So it could be that they just completely owe more than the property is worth. And in those cases, we talk about short sales, because that's a way of trying to negotiate with the bank and getting the owner out of that situation.
Right. Now, I did want to talk about driving for dollars because it's a terminology that a lot of people hear often, and it's very popular in South Florida. So if you could talk more about then your experience with it.
Sure. So driving for dollars, I think is really interesting. It's definitely time consuming. So it is for the quote unquote full-time or somebody who's spending a lot of time on investing. And it's literally driving around into neighborhoods that you're interested in investing and finding the rundown properties, the properties that look abandoned or no one's taking care of them. It looks like the grass hasn't been cut in 6 months. And looking for those properties because they are the good opportunities for investing. And then going from there and investigating and seeing how you can get a hold of the owner and all the steps that we'll go through in a minute. But driving for dollars is just that, driving around looking for the opportunity.
Yeah, and since we do have realtors on the call, and I know a lot of realtors might be interested in this, and even just people that are in the back of their mind thinking about how they can start investing, I think this is one of the best ways to do it because we all drive around. And I even was the other day, I was talking to an Uber driver and I was telling him, this is a perfect thing that you can do. You're driving all the time, start writing down the information and you want to invest. This is a perfect way to start doing it. Now, if you are driving for dollars, how should we talk about how we start getting the information now or?
Well, just to highlight a few points that we're going to get into, one thing is about purchasing lists. We'll get into that, and unsafe structure properties that are great for rehab opportunities, and probate properties, which are somebody has passed away, and now the property and the estate needs to go through probate, and the property needs to be sold.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with the when you find the property, like a distressed property or something like that, or if we do end up buying the lists that
Mhm.
you had mentioned, which I'm assuming there's different companies out there that sell these type of lists, what would be the next step that you see your clients doing?
Right. So just to go back on the list really quick, um, you can Google different, they're basically third-party companies that will go through the clerk of court in whatever county it is that you're interested in, and they will compile a list of all of the new foreclosure cases, all of the new probate cases, and you could purchase the list. And really what you're buying is a time saver. So they've done all that work for you so that you can reach out and already have some of the information on hand. So that's one way of finding the deals. But like you were saying, approaching the seller. So you've driven around, you found a good opportunity. Now what do you do? I have investors that do several things. You can just literally send a mail out, like a mail out postcard that's more of a generic template to an entire zip code or in a neighborhood, wherever you want that you think you might find. Maybe there's more than one opportunity and you just want to kind of blast it out there. So mail outs are a good way. If you found this one house that you really think is a good idea, um, maybe the house isn't abandoned, you could write a letter, just a letter directed to the owner of that home. You can find out who owns it by looking it up on the county property appraiser's website and seeing the name. So it's not, you're not addressing it to whom it may concern. You can actually address it to Tamara or to whoever,
Mm-hmm.
because you can find their name or company name. If you're able to obtain any numbers, of course, phone call, text, you could also just knock on the door. Of course, I don't recommend this in all situations because you don't know how people react to certain things. So of course, use
Yeah.
caution and be reasonable. But knocking on the door, I think, is an overlooked opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I've experienced, because I've done this quite a bit to find properties for investors to find, and a lot of times when you do the research in the background, it's already with an attorney. So it's very difficult for me to get through to them. I mean, I've actually gone in person to try to talk to an attorney. The attorney's not there. So how can we get through like to that next step?
Well, as an attorney, I'm sorry to admit this, but if a non-attorney tries to get a hold of an attorney, you're probably not going to be getting a call back. But I do encourage you, come to me. Um, if I can find out who the attorney is, which I can if it's a probate case or a foreclosure case, and there's been an attorney retained by the owner or the heirs,
Mm-hmm.
I can reach out. And for the most part, I will get a courtesy call back. And it might not turn into anything. Maybe they say, look, it's not for sale, or whatever the case may be. But we can at least get the information pretty much right then and there and see if it's a deal worth pursuing or it's time to move on.
And this is going to be for like pre-foreclosure cases, right? Before it's already gone to auction or.
Right. So it'll be an active foreclosure, right? So there's already been a case filed. Somebody has been served with foreclosure and then they've gone out and gotten an attorney. But there may still be a lot of time and we can still work. And if it's a good opportunity, we can still pursue it. And you can close like any other closing. You're just getting a good deal.
Okay. Okay, so once, let's say we've gone through the whole steps and we can't get a hold of an attorney, or it's already in the actual, it's already an active foreclosure, right? Or it's already that step. What are like the next steps that we would be doing?
Well, before we get there, I just also wanted to point out another way that people can try and approach the seller. It's, if it's not their primary residence, so knocking on the door is not going to do you anything. Writing a letter, sending it to the property is not going to do anything. You can check the tax collector's website and see where the mailing address is for the property. So that's a free and quick way to see if you can get any more information. And you might have another address. You may not, but you could try that and send a letter there or see if you can get any information that way. But there's also something called a skip trace, which is essentially a third-party company who finds people. So yes, there is a hard cost involved. probably 100, 200 bucks, just depends. And I'm sure they'll give you a quote on that. But that's literally what they do, is they're trying to find this person for you so that you can approach them and see about this opportunity.
Now, is a skip trace usually, just to go back to that, because that might be something that someone would be interested in doing, that's all done online? Does it take a long time? Are they pretty quick? Do you know?
I mean, it really depends, because remember, they're looking for somebody. So how hard is somebody trying to hide, or not even
Yeah.
hide, but just where are they? Maybe they're in another country. So it really depends on a lot of variables that it's hard to say right now. But usually that skip trace company can give you kind of a timeline just so that they can keep expectations realistic.
Okay, so if you have a person themselves that they're looking to do this, or you have a realtor that's going to be doing it, I think a skip trace would be something really interesting to at least become acquaint, have a, what would the word be? Have
Yeah,
a
be
company.
familiarized with it. I
Yes,
mean, it
familiar.
is a good way. Now, if you're going to do a skip trace for 10 properties, that's going to add up really quickly. So I think a skip trace is really good for that opportunity that you're really, really interested in, that you know was going to be a good deal, that you've done all the research that you can do. And the only thing that you need is to find this person. A skip trace might be the way to go.
Okay. All right, perfect. So yeah, now we go, I had jumped a little bit because I get excited when it comes to active foreclosures. But so active foreclosures, we have this. This is where I get even confused sometimes because there's so much really involved. But if you can simplify it for us.
So active foreclosure. So what puts you into foreclosure? You stopped paying your mortgage,
Mhm.
or you even stopped paying your association dues. Associations can foreclose as well, and that's important to note the distinction when you are researching an active foreclosure. So the first thing is, look, an active foreclosure, again, you can purchase a list for this. So it
Mhm.
might be worth it to purchase a list, and that way you can do some research on your own, and that legwork has been done for you. So the first thing is just to check the docket. And the docket is in the clerk of court, so in that county's website. You can literally check all of the steps that have been taken in this particular case. So everything that's been filed, if there's an attorney of record, what's happened, when were they served, and a lot of times, and again, this does depend on the county, you're able to actually access documents, so you can see you can read the complaint, you can read the list pendants, you can read any motions that were filed. So that's huge for me. If you tell me, hey, I'm interested in a foreclosure, the first thing I'm going to ask you for is a case number, because I
Mhm.
don't really need to hear it from you. I need to look up the docket and see what's going on, and I have a really good picture of what's happening. So why is it so important? Because it's important to know how far along we are in the foreclosure process.
Mm.
Is there a
Now,
sale
I
date? Mhm.
just going back to what you just said, from my experience, if I use an attorney, they'll be able to actually read it a little bit more in depth, right? You'll have a much more clear picture than just anyone opening the case and seeing
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I read these all the time, and it's not expected for a newer investor to know what it is that they're looking at. So I encourage you, come to me, give me the case number, and let's review it and see what's going on. I can tell you in a 5-minute research of this particular docket how much time I think we have, how far along we are, if there's an attorney involved, if there is a sale date. I can get an estimation of how much I think is owed, and you will know again if this is worth pursuing, because if you bring me a foreclosure and the sale date is tomorrow, you're going to have to move on. That's not enough time.
Okay.
If you bring me a foreclosure and it was just filed, right, the owner was just served in the last few weeks, the last few months even, now we're talking, because that is a good opportunity, um, and there's still plenty of time. if
Okay.
um, if there is an attorney, I can see who the attorney of record is for the owner, right? The defendant in this case. I can contact them and say, hey, I have a third party who is interested in purchasing the property. Is the owner interested in selling? because maybe they're doing something behind the scenes that I'm unaware of. They might be trying to refinance it with hard money, or they're doing a loan modification, or maybe their great aunt is giving them $100,000 to become current on the mortgage. I don't know. So that's the way that I'm going to find out if there's an interest in selling.
No, foreclosure, I mean, obviously we need the seller's okay and everything, but it is ideal to do a foreclosure prior to auction, right? If we're
Oh,
able to
absolutely.
get a foreclosure. Okay.
Absolutely. I think there's so much more opportunity in a foreclosure than at auction for so many reasons, other than the ones that I just mentioned. But you can also um, have a full closing. The only difference is that I have this foreclosure that me as a title agent, I need to make sure is cleared up and dealt with. But you as a buyer, it's a straight closing. So you can go under contract like normal. If you're getting financing, you'll have that opportunity as long as we have enough time. And
Mhm.
again, I'm going to tell you that we have X amount of time. Um,
So if we can clear up that gap between foreclosure and auction, because it's usually said hand in hand. People say, "Oh, I just bought a foreclosure," or "I'm gonna, buy a foreclosure in the court," but it's very different. So I think differentiating the foreclosure and then the auction, and then we can maybe talk a little bit more about what it entails purchasing in the auction, and
right. So the main difference buying foreclosure versus buying at auction is primarily I have the opportunity to do all of the title work that needs to be done. So title search, lien search, everything that needs to be done to ensure that you as the buyer are getting clear title. So there's
Mhm.
no encumbrances on title. The only encumbrance, well, there might be other things, but the main encumbrance that we're dealing with is the foreclosure, which we already know about.
And
Plus, I'm not. Uh-huh.
encumbrance, just so that we're all on the same page. Encumbrance is what? Just so that.
So if you have a property that does not have clear and marketable title, it means that there's some sort of a cloud on title. A foreclosure is a cloud on title, but it's one that can be fixed. There could be other things. Let's say that there's a code violation because they didn't cut the grass. I mean, that could be not it's not usually a cloud on title, but that can be fixed. Cut the grass, work with the county, get it mitigated. So that's an easy thing. But there's other things that can't really be mitigated. And if you're buying at auction, you're not going to have the opportunity to do. So regarding auction, if there's enough time, we could do a title and lien search. But remember, in auction, you're trying to beat out other people. So it's a race. Once you're able to bid, it's a race to win.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people will find an auction property and say, oh, I'm really interested in it, but they don't do their due diligence.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people come to me after they bought something at auction, and I have to tell them bad news because what they bought is encumbered by a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So before I dive into that, do you have any questions about what I've said so far?
No, just adding to it, I do. I mean, I've also gotten the consequence of an auction that was purchased without doing the research, and then there's liens, there's tenants that aren't cooperating. There's a lot there that they may have not been prepared for. So I do agree. I mean, auction is one of those risky investments. So when we were talking about type of investors, the riskier type for sure do auctions. But I think there is a lot of pluses to it, but as long as we're prepared for the negatives and, there's a good attorney, obviously you that's helping out, I think that's, it's doable.
Right. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be scaring anyone off from an auction opportunity because it can be a good opportunity. But I really do want to differentiate between a foreclosure that has not actually been sold yet and the auction property. Because remember, foreclosure, we're still going to do a full closing. There's enough time for me to research the title, do a lien search, all of that fun stuff. Make sure there's no liens against the property and make sure you as the buyer are getting a title policy when you purchase.
Mhm.
Whereas an auction property, I encourage you as a potential buyer, investor, do the research as much as you can. Look into the public records, just dig through it as much as you can. I can also do it for you, and you're welcome to come to me with that. But if you come to me and you tell me, hey, I need to do this search. The auction is tomorrow. That's tough because I also have other clients and other things that needs to get done. So as much time in advance to do these things, the better. Now
Yeah,
you
and I
might be,
think, uh-huh, sorry.
no, you might be looking at 10 properties. So you don't want
Yeah.
to spend the money on a title and lien search for 10 properties. And I get that. But again, there's a lot of preliminary research that you can do on your own and be able to see, oh, there's this outstanding second mortgage that hasn't been dealt with in any foreclosure or anything. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I always recommend people that would be interested in auction, if this is very appeasing to them, to focus on one section at first, to really learn if it's going to be a building or if it's going to be a development, to really learn that development and just stay on the court site and see when the property is going to be coming up so they can start getting, start driving by, start seeing the background with the city, if there's any liens and that type of thing, rather than just getting onto the website and starting to put a whole bunch of bids, which
Right.
that has happened before, and people end up buying something that they really did not need or want to buy. So
Right. So here's what happens sometimes, and people come to me after the fact, and it's not their favorite thing to hear. They buy a property at auction, so there was not a proper title and lien search done. They can't have me do the closing because at that point, the bank requires that you use their title people to do a quick closing. You're not getting a title policy at that moment. So now you spent money on this. Well, what did you buy? So then they come to me after the fact, right? And I say, okay, well, let's do a title and lien search. And we do that. And we find that there is a second mortgage, there's a homeowners association, there's a city or county lien. And now the new owner is responsible for negotiating and dealing with all of these things. So now it falls on them unless they're okay with these third parties coming to foreclose at some point in time. So there's a couple of things there. Doing your due diligence as much as you can. And after the fact, what did you buy? So if you bought a bank foreclosure, you're probably in a better position because we would at least extinguish that one big lien, right? And it'll be pretty easy. Look, you by driving by the property if it's in a homeowners association, right? If it's in a gated community, you know for sure you're dealing with an association.
Yeah.
So it's not that hard to figure out if there is money owed there. I actually have clients who have purchased the homeowners association lien, mistakenly purchased the homeowners association lien, because HOAs are very quick to foreclose and they're very aggressive. So a lot of times they will initiate a foreclosure before the bank ever does. So you found this property for $15,000. What a deal, right? In South Florida, what a deal, 15 grand. So you bought it, you're excited, you come to me, and then I have to tell you, okay, but there's a $200,000 Wells Fargo mortgage outstanding. And you didn't know because you didn't do your due diligence. So now you have to either negotiate this lien, refinance something, see if they'll work with you to get out from under that situation, or you can do what a lot of my investors have done, and they've even done it purposefully, is rent it out for as long as you can until the actual bank starts to foreclose, and then let it go. And so if you bought it for 15 grand, right, but you're renting it out for 2 grand a month, by the end of 1 year, it's 24. And even if you do go into foreclosure because the bank decides to come and foreclose, there's also ways that we can buy time on that end so that you can continue to rent it out for as long as possible. So that is a short game, but it is something that investors do, but don't do it blindly.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that quite a bit as well, especially in South Florida, because the condo associations here are incredibly aggressive. But yeah, as long as you did not do it blindly, I think, you're prepared for what the negotiating, having an attorney that's going to be working with the banks, with the foreclosure, whatever. But the worst is when you did not know that you were doing it, and then that's a pain.
Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow. And then the
Yeah.
one other thing that I wanted to point out is, like I mentioned, in a foreclosure, you're going to have a closing and you're going to get a title policy. For an
Mhm.
auction property, you are not. You're not getting a title policy. But
Yeah.
you may be able to after the fact. So when you buy it, you're not getting a title policy.
Right. So
But if
after the fact, you buy it and then you go to someone that does title, like you,
right,
and
so
you
you
do
can
after.
come to me, yep, and then I can do the title and lien search, or even better if we'd already done it before you bought the property, just so that we are already aware of the issues and can start working on them. But regardless, we're doing a title and lien search, and if we can clear up all of the issues,
Mm-hmm.
then you can get a title policy. But if you can't, because maybe there's $1 million tax lien, I mean, I don't know, I'm just coming up with things, but
Right.
something that you're not going to be able to overcome, then you're not going to be able to get a title policy.
Right.
So,
Now, if we have any, sorry, newbies that might be listening to this, a title policy, what exactly does it do? Just quickly so that they know what we're
so
talking
when you, and in a normal circumstance, when you purchase a property, you're purchasing a title insurance policy. So it's a form of insurance, but it's the cheapest insurance you will ever buy. You pay for it one time at the time of closing,
about.
and it will insure your property from the beginning of time until your closing date. So if something should have come up, or there's some sort of a title defect that wasn't caught or couldn't have been caught, and in South Florida, what comes to mind is some sort of forgery or fraud. So there's no way somebody could have known that that wasn't, Tamara's signature, right? But now
Right.
Tamara comes forward and says, wait a minute, I never signed that. I never agreed to this. So you have a title insurance policy that you can use to defend you as the new owner. So you would contact the title insurance company, and they would essentially put an attorney in charge of your case, one of their panel attorneys, and
Right.
they will fight for you and they will settle this claim for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to have. And like I said, it's the cheapest, and it's not like you have to pay for it every year. You're paying for it one time. And that way, if anything ever were to come up in the future that occurred prior to when you bought the property, you're going to be defended for that.
Perfect. Now, one of the things I did want to talk about, especially because if you're going to be driving around and whatnot, is unsafe structures. Because that's a whole animal to itself. So if we can kind of go through that, your experience, because I know you're very experienced in that. I know personally, we've had developer clients that are interested in that type of purchase because they can develop it, right? But what should we know about unsafe structures and the whole process?
So unsafe structures is a very niche area, in my opinion. And the reason why I like it and I like to talk about it is because I was on the Unsafe Structures board for one of the biggest counties here in Florida. So as a board member, there was a panel of us, and we listened to the cases that came before us, and we decided within what we were allowed to do, we decided what would happen with these properties. Um, so in that way, I learned a lot, and I think it's just was super interesting, and I really enjoyed it. So I also learned that it can be a good opportunity for an investor, especially one with a lot of capital,
Mm-hmm.
because unsafe structures is just that, they're unsafe. There's a big problem with these properties. They might not have a roof, or the roof has caved in. So you can't allow somebody to live in there or to be in there. So
Mm-hmm.
the county or the city will come around and say, no, no, here is an unsafe structures violation, and then it will be set for a hearing before
Mm-hmm.
the board. Um, One thing I like is, generally, and I'll say check with the city or county that you're interested in, the hearings are open to the public, so just attend and listen and gather information. One way to find out the how and where is to Google it. Just
Right.
Google the city or county and unsafe structures, and you'll get to a phone number. It might not be the right number, but a phone number, and you can call and they'll direct you to the board, and then they'll be able to let you know when the next hearing is so that you can stop in. Right now, I would imagine that there aren't any happening just because of coronavirus, and I don't think any cities and counties are using Zoom for these types of hearings. But
Yeah.
once we're back to normal, that's a way for you to find out how you can go see and listen.
So that's a great outside the box way of getting properties, really. Going as an investor, going as an agent representing investors and seeing what properties where the owner might not even want to deal with it, right?
Right, because that's the thing, right? Is the owner is responsible for bringing these properties now back up to code, and that is can be very, very expensive, especially if it's unsafe structures. It's usually a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So this very well could be an owner that's just, this is too much for them to handle and they are drowning and they don't know how to get out from under this. So as an investor, you can step in and make an offer with the understanding that the issue, the violations, the liens will now become yours. But
Right.
there's still an opportunity there potentially. And I just want to point out that cities and counties want compliance. They're not after the homeowner to squeeze them for thousands and thousands of dollars that the homeowner does not have. They want properties to be to code. They want to keep up the aesthetics in the area. And that's what we all want as well as neighbors, right? I don't want to be living next to a house that the roof has caved in and you can't live there, it's dilapidated, it's a mess. I don't want that. I would rather the homeowner be afforded the opportunity to fix it. So what they want is compliance. And once it is in compliance, they are willing to mitigate fines. So when somebody is getting hit with $200 a day fines from the city or county, it's not to say that that will stick. And those grow obviously very quickly, but there's ways to mitigate that. Number one is just bring it into compliance, and then I can step in, I can attend a hearing, and I can mitigate those fines.
Yeah, which kudos to you. I know that you're awesome at that. So that is great to have the knowledge of how to do that. So I just wanted to confirm, not confirm, but just kind of state that I would, from my experience, what I've seen is owners of properties that are refusing to take care of it and they've had to go to a hearing and now they just want to get rid of it. I think that the cities or counties, they tend to be more favorable to the new owner that is saying, I'm going to fix it, here's a proof, here's everything, and they tend to negotiate with the new owner a lot more easily than they will with the seller that ended up not really doing anything about it.
Yeah, I've seen it where you have exactly that. You have an investor who bought this property that needs all this work, that has all of these fines accruing, and you give them the opportunity to fix it. You extend the time that they have to give them something reasonable so they can get it done. And even if they haven't gotten it done because maybe it was rainy season and it was raining every single day and they just couldn't, and they come back and we can extend it again. So I will say that cities and counties are reasonable when it comes to that if they see that you're putting in the effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Now, the next topic I really want to talk about is probate. And I know it's kind of like, it's a little bit of a sticky topic, but you can really get good deals when it comes to probate. So if we can kind of go through it and the process and your experience with it, it would be great.
Sure. So just so that everyone is aware, I also handle probate matters.
Okay.
So I do know from the side of a probate attorney how things work. So just really quickly, those lists that we mentioned at the beginning that can be purchased, you can also find them for probate property. So that's new probate cases that have been filed, and then you can get the information and dig through them. I can also look at the docket for you. The difference generally in these dockets is that I can see what's going on, but I cannot access the actual documents and read them like I could in a foreclosure. These are much more protected, so I don't have the access to them. But
Okay.
there's still a good opportunity because you might have heirs that are anxious to sell. They are now, remember, somebody dies, they could still have a mortgage on the property. They could still be paying a homeowners association dues every month. And now they've passed away, but those payments still need to get made. So now the heirs are unable to sell the property because it's stuck in probate, and they have to still make all of these payments. And what about their own expenses, right? They have their own house, their spouse, their kids, their expenses, their car payments, and now they weren't really expecting to have to deal with these additional expenses. Even if they get paid back later, they're out of pocket now. So they can be very anxious to sell.
Right. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about before we regarding the lists, a lot of investors might get these lists and just call, or realtors will do that, and I don't think that has gotten the best traction. One of the things that I love is usually with probate there is an attorney involved, so having an
Right.
attorney talk to another attorney, right?
Right. And I've actually done that. I've reached out because remember, not only are you dealing with an heir who's in this situation, but their loved one passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So the last thing they want is for somebody to just try and take or buy or whatever. It just, they're not in the mindset for that usually.
Right.
So when there's an attorney, I can just see that and I can call the attorney and say, hey, I see there's a property here. Is this something that the heirs want to sell? Maybe they don't. Maybe they want to stay with the property. Maybe it's rented out and it's profitable for them. But
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way for me to express interest on behalf of a third party investor.
Yeah. And how long does it normally take? Like, what tends to be the time frame in the process?
So I will say that you need to have patience in the probate. Patience is key because you know, it's not, the probate is not just the property, it's the entire estate that someone has. So it could be bank accounts, cars, maybe they have 10 properties, pensions, whatever the case may be. So there could be a lot more involved than only what you're interested in, which is the property.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's a process like any other. It is a court process. So it could take as little as just a few months, or it could take years. But
Okay.
one thing to keep in mind is that generally court approval will be required. So when this can be under contract, but the contract should state that it's contingent on court approval, because until you have that, for the most part, you can't close.
And what does a court need for them to close?
So the court's generally going to ask for a BPO, a broker's price opinion. So somebody like Tamara, who is not potentially directly involved in the transaction, can really run comps, right? Run the comparables and see what the value of the property is.
Mm-hmm.
One thing is to, you know, if this is a $500,000 property, you're not going to be able to buy it for $200,000. The
Right.
court is just won't allow it. And again, if there's an attorney for the heirs, they're on the side of the heirs, so they want the heirs to obviously get as much as they can in the sale of the property. Excuse me. So it does have to be market value ish. And I say ish because maybe it is in a $500,000 neighborhood, but maybe it's run down or it needs a full rehab. So that has to be taken into account also with the BPO.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, so I know that we didn't say this beforehand, but if anyone has any specific questions regarding everything that we've gone through, I know it's a lot of information and there probably are questions. Feel free to chat them in or take off the microphone and we can discuss. So that is asking, how likely are the cities to negotiate a lien for an extension of the home that wasn't permitted?
So the first thing is going to be compliance. So you will have to get a permit or some sort of a variance. So that's like an exception to the permit that the city's going to say, well, okay, we're going to allow it to stay here. But however it shakes out, it needs to be brought into compliance. And then the lien amount is very, very negotiable. That I'm confident of, but the actual issue needs to be brought in compliance. And although I'm not a contractor, so I'm not the one that's actually going to be physically doing any construction work on a property, and I'm not going to be the one that's submitting permits and plans to a city or a county, But I do work with those people and say, hey, I need to know where we are. Has this been done? That way I know when it's been done, I can have the actual inspector for the city or county go out there and file and approve it, and then file an affidavit of compliance. And that's kind of like my green light to be able to start negotiating with the city.
Yeah, and with my experience doing it, on average, it takes a good 3 months, like to be realistic. Like it's
Yeah, I
not one
mean,
day to another. Yeah.
especially if you need to do permits, plans, and things like that. I mean, it's work, but it is doable to negotiate the lien amount as long as the issue is in compliance.
Yeah. And I
So
think
that's a good
the big,
question.
yeah, the big takeaway I think from all of this is there are some really great deals, but we have to be prepared financially. Like have a
Right.
good buffer there of all the worst case scenarios that can happen, and financially be able to pay for those. You know, inspectors. If you do buy something where it has to be in compliance, it could be that, I mean, we had one property in Lauderdale by the Sea that a lot of the properties had different studios attached to it. I mean, years and years before. So it had been sold and sold and sold. And now the city's making the current owner bring it back to code. And they had to pay a lot of money for contractors to come and put it back to code. They were able to
And
negotiate.
architects
Yeah,
to draw plans. I mean, there's a
yeah,
lot that gets involved in that.
exactly. But at the end of the day, it's still a great piece of property, and it's kind of seeing the long term of it. Okay, I'm going to be able to make up this money in 2 to 3 years, and it's understanding that is part of the risk and that is part of the investment.
Right. And I love Lauderdale by the Sea. So that's a very popular area.
Yeah,
Any
I
other
agree.
questions?
Usually around how much lead time ideal for contacting an attorney, Christy, for a title lien search, and or what's the average processing time range?
I will say 2 weeks as a short answer. It can be done in less time, but remember, for example, for a lien search, I'm also dependent on the city or county to hand over that information. And none of us can realistically expect them to turn it around in 24 hours. But 2 weeks is more than enough time to get both title searches back and lien searches. It can be less time, but again, if we can have the most time, so that way we can see what the issues are and see how easy or difficult they're going to be to deal with. So I would say 2 weeks is a sweet spot.
And on average, just for the investors, kind of starting to know how much money they're going to have to allot, on average, give or take, how much is a lien search, like a basic
Sure. So, and those things are also, they have a hard cost involved from a third party vendor. So depending on the city, because cities also sometimes have a charge, it's usually between 185 and 215 for a lien search. Title search, 150 to 250.
Okay, so around $400 for.
Right. So that's why you're not going to want to do 10 of them at one time unless you do, but that's something that to take into account as far as your budget.
Yeah, and that's not including also the condo search, right? The estoppel. So that's going to be, if it's a condo, that's separate, right?
Right. So an association is required to get what's called an estoppel, which is a document from the association to inform you of if there, first of all, what the dues are on that property. So if it's $100 a month or $1,000 a quarter, or whatever it is, and if there are any association violations, which might be, hey, you need to clean your roof, or hey, you need to replace the mulch, which I've actually had that as a violation, like a $10, like it's mulch. I don't know, it was crazy, but associations are crazy like that.
Yeah.
So that is something, but so that can be 150 to 350 usually.
Yeah, I see it. It's South Florida. I mean, you're closer to 350 usually, but
Yeah, it depends on how much time we have again.
There is, you mentioned earlier in regards to purchasing a home for $50,000 and renting it out until it goes to foreclosure. How can it go into foreclosure if you already purchased it? I was on a call, so I didn't hear most of that part. Sorry. Thank you for answering my previous question.
No problem. And there is a lot to unpack with that one, and I know I kind of went through it pretty quickly. So what I meant was, and what I was referring to is homeowners associations. A lot of times, people think that they're buying a great deal by purchasing a property for the 15,000, 10,000, what have you, at auction, not realizing that what they actually bought was the foreclosure from the homeowners association because somebody didn't pay their dues and they had accrued, and that's what they're owed. Um, Associations are notoriously very aggressive when it comes to foreclosures, and oftentimes they will foreclose on a property faster than a bank will. So a homeowner may not have made their association payments or their mortgage payment, but the Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whoever it is, they haven't bothered to come around and start a foreclosure. Whereas the HOA said, oh, you haven't paid for 3 months? Here we go.
Yeah.
It could be for as little as $5,000. And they will, so then what happens is it'll go into foreclosure, right? And then it comes to auction and somebody buys it. But what they bought was the association foreclosure. And eventually that Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whoever, will come and foreclose on their lien, which obviously is going to be substantially more.
Right. I do want to go real quickly regarding mention about the managing this type of property. But if everyone can write down their email in the chat box, we have this recorded. So I know some people kind of came in the middle of it. We're going to be able to email you the recording and some other resources. So please put your email there. Now, if you are going to be purchasing a property like this through auction or whatever it may be, and you're going to be holding it as an investment, some of the things that you want to keep in mind is you're probably going to have to do some repairs. So in the cost that you're going to be putting to purchase this property, you want to be on the higher end. So a lot of times I recommend clients to budget retiling the floor. So a good way of doing that is taking the square footage of the property and adding $3 to it. So let's say it's 1,000 square feet, you're going to do $3, so $3,000 for the cost of tiling plus the labor. So doing quick numbers like that before you go and you purchase a property to see, do I have enough to fix this property that I can't see the inside, worst case scenario. And a lot of this, it's really fun to manage yourself. You know, you can be hands-on and dealing with the whole process. You can hire a property management company like myself that I will be not only helping bringing when it comes to lien search or anything like that, being in contact with the association and with the city, and then giving everything to Christy as well, working together. Having a manager that will help you go through the whole process helps you because it's a third party. It's kind of like a buffer. So sometimes it might get frustrating. It might get exhausting going through all of that and having someone in the middle taking care of it. Just like Christy was saying before, when you're dealing with probate or when you're dealing with attorneys, having just someone else between you and the other person will help you facilitate the process. I've done this for quite some time, so do feel free to reach out to me as well if it is something you're going to want to do when it comes to the management side. So once you purchase it, that next step, I'll be happy to let you know all the tricks that I've learned and the tips and all of that. So
right. And then just to kind of go off that, I know there's another question, but just to continue on that, I don't know if Yvette had heard this. I know she was on a call before. So I also had mentioned that there are some investors who purchase that HOA lien for 15, 10, whatever it is, $1,000 strategically. It's purposeful, and they're doing it so that they can rent it out in the short term until that mortgage company comes to foreclose on the property. So that's a perfect opportunity for a short-term investment. Are you going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars? No, probably not. But if you're making 15, if you spend 15 plus whatever you budget for repairs, etc., and then you're renting it out at the fair rental value, let's say 2,000, I mean easily 2,000, I'm being conservative here. You could rent it out for a year, 2 years, who knows? And in that time, Tamara can be the property manager for it. So really, you're just making that, you just have that cash flow coming in, and she's dealing with all of the headaches. And you know that eventually they will foreclose and you'll lose the property, but that's okay because you've already made a profit. Or it might still be in your best interest, again, depends on the situation, to actually try to work with the bank and negotiate a payoff or get a mortgage to pay them off and keep the property. It might still be worth your time and money, and you can keep renting it out.
Yeah, and I do manage properties for banks myself, and banks are oftentimes very open to negotiating. It's not like they just want to take the property, so they will be open to it. Now, Ronnie's asking, I've seen properties being purchased with illegal additions and then new ones, and then the new owners say, why didn't the title company catch that? Do title companies check the work that was completed with a permit, or do they only see if there was an actual violation recorded? That's a good one because that has happened to me a lot.
So
Yeah.
actually, that's quite a loaded question. So there's a little bit to unpack. So like we've talked about several times, we will do a lien search. And the lien search is not just for liens. It will also show us if there's open permits, expired permits, any code violations on the property. They may not be a lien, it just may be a violation, right? So the fence or the grass or something relatively simple. Why didn't the title company catch that? Because if somebody constructed an addition or something without a permit and never got caught, it's not going to show up on the lien search. So there's no way for us to know something that doesn't exist in the county records. But this is a slight bit of a buyer beware situation, and the buyer has every right to ask the seller, hey, this addition, was it done with a permit? If it was, can you please show me whatever material, whatever documents they have to prove that? Or if it wasn't, that might be a point where the buyer takes a step back and says, is this something that I want to pursue? Or is it something that I could use as leverage, maybe to negotiate the price? Because now this might get caught and it will fall on the buyer. So that's why we can see the work that was completed with a permit, but if a permit was never pulled, and that's not something I would be able to see. And because I don't actually go to the property, there's no way for me to know.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, especially on the investment side, it's not just addition to properties, because the addition is what we hear a lot in South Florida, you know, the in-law quarters and whatnot, but even fences. I've had properties where we bought it with a fence and then it was never permitted. So now the new owner had to redo the fence because it wasn't done per code. And they were really upset that how could this be and whatever. And, you know, at the end of the day, if they didn't do it without a permit and we didn't notice that there was a permit on it and the buyer bought it, it is the buyer's responsibility now to bring that fence up to code. So that is something that happens quite a bit.
Right, and it's built into the contract that the buyer can ask for any documentation about whatever it is that they think might not be permitted or might be an issue in the future, or if the seller has done any projects and they want to just see that it's up to code and that they did it legally. So they can just ask for it and the seller should be disclosing it.
Mm-hmm. Now, the next question that Ronnie has is very good that I've gone through this, but I want to hear your take on it, Chrissy, too, is if the property has a squatter, what's the recourse that they take?
Oh, the lovely squatter.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to deal with that. So a lot of times people think there's a squatter, I need to evict them. But you actually cannot do an eviction. An eviction, in order to file an eviction, there needs to be a landlord-tenant relationship. And a squatter is the opposite of that. A squatter is somebody who broke into the house and is squatting there and living there. And you did not have a lease with them. You did not agree for them to be there. So an eviction is improper and you will spend money and it will get dismissed. And then you've lost time. So for a squatter, generally, the way to get them out is either through an ejectment or an unlawful detainer. It's usually an ejectment action, which is an eviction in a different form. And mainly the reason being is that there is no landlord-tenant relationship, but somebody is in the property and has refused to leave. So Florida is very not owner-friendly when it comes to these things. I can't ever advise that you just change the locks because the proper procedure is to go through the court system. So that is something that you should budget for as well if you think that that might be an issue.
Yeah, but the ejectments, I mean, in my experience, have been pretty quick. You know, if you have an attorney doing an ejectment, I find that it goes faster than evictions, in my experience.
Right, and it very well could be, but you just need a budget for the extra time that you're going to be spending not being able to access the property and the money that's going to go into it. So as long as you have that cushion, it's certainly not something to deter a person from purchasing, but it's just the reality, unfortunately. We don't have as many issues, at least that I see these days with squatters. But I know, you know, when the 2008 crash happened, it was a much bigger issue.
Yeah, the squatter situation I personally have dealt with have been family members or someone that knew that the property was being foreclosed on and they left and then they went in there. So, you know, they had all the furniture and everything, but it wasn't just someone breaking in. You're right. But yeah, good question. Any other questions?
Don't forget if you can put your email into the chat so that we can let you know of upcoming webinars. Thank you,
Mhm.
David. And send you the recording for this one in case you want to send it along to anyone else.
Yeah, the next webinar we're going to be doing is going to be specifically towards foreign national investors. It's going to be very informative, so please join that one if you're interested in. We're going to be sending you the info for that. I'm going to be putting my email here as well.
That's a good idea. Well, here's all my information on this slide. My email is there as well. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat if that's easier. But feel free to reach out. I'm happy to do a consultation. And even if it's not something that you're ready to move on right now, if you just want to kind of air out some potential issues or you have additional questions that you didn't want to ask, give me a call. We'll set up something and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and it is worth noting, Chrissy does speak Spanish as well. So if you have to call in Spanish, I speak Spanish too. In our team, we have, you know, Spanish, Hebrew, French. So if anyone is sharing this and they would like to talk about it more in the native language, also feel free to reach out to us regarding that. So.
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome.
And also just my main office is in Broward, but we also have a satellite office in Miami-Dade for those who can't or won't come to Broward. And for closings, we do close throughout Florida. So really anywhere in Florida we can close. But personally, I do go to the Tri-County area. So Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach.
Yeah, and one of the things I do want to mention, especially regarding investors, because this is going to be geared more towards investors, the way that Chrissy closes is really efficient. I love the way, like the whole closing process, it's so smooth, it's very tech friendly. You get all the documentation, so it makes the process at least a lot faster and smoother when you're going through all of this. So.
Thank you. And one thing I do want to bring up is I actually use a key. It looks like a key, but it really goes into your USB drive, and both buyers and sellers get a key at closing that is unique to them. And we upload all of their documents to this key after closing. So you don't have to carry around a stack of paper. You could just have this key and access your documents at any time. And even if you lose it, you could still just go to the website and it'll take you into a secure cyber portal and you can access your documents that way. But the reason why I bring it up is because as an investor, ideally you're going to be buying multiple properties and we can use the same key for all of your properties. So you're not stuck with, 10 different ones or 10 different logins to access it. You can have everything in one place. It's stored securely. You can download it if you want to put it on your personal computer, or if you want to print it. You can do whatever you want with it, but you'll have everything stored in one place.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Alrighty, if there's no more questions, thank you everyone so much for attending. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did. And we're gonna get together soon and go over the foreign nationals.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time, and stay safe, stay healthy, and give either Tamara or myself a call if you have any questions. We're happy to help, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Take care.